Hello everyone, good afternoon and thank you for tuning in. So as no successful company can be built on its own, we'll focus on the topic of networking in this session, especially networking in the digital health world. Our two guests will discuss why networking in the digital health world is so important and where you can start, what you should do, what you should not do, and share insightful tips and tricks. So let's welcome today's guests, Dominik Pförringer. Dominik Pförringer is an orthopedic and trauma surgeon in Munich. He also holds an MBA from Isar and has worked as a consultant in the healthcare sector. He teaches entrepreneurship to young doctors and medical students and fosters the digital healthcare ecosystem in Munich with different events and formats and also his own networking platform. The other Dominik, so two Dominiks will discuss or will hold the discussion today. So the other Dominik is head of entrepreneurship and tech education at UnternehmerTUM. He is responsible for entrepreneurial and technology-oriented activities for students. He's especially working on and also developing new methods in teaching and delivering prototypes in a flipped classroom setting. So with that, let's welcome the two Dominiks, and I'm looking forward to a very insightful discussion.
Well, thank you, Miki, for the great intro, for all that you've said about Dominik and Dominik. It's a great pleasure to be here today and to talk about networking in healthcare. So, Dominik, from your point of view, from your experience, from what we've done so far in the past couple of years, why is networking in general so important, and why is it so important in healthcare?
So, I mean, networking in general is important because what you can learn as an entrepreneur is not in a classroom, it's on the street. So you need to know people, you need to know experts, you need to get industry access. And I think that networking is essential to get this industry access, to have a learning opportunity together with a learning opportunity in the real world in the end. And especially if you look into healthcare, usually that's been a very closed environment, yeah? Accessing an OR or an emergency room is not something you can just do without being a patient, obviously. And opening these environments is a crucial thing. And but we also need to know and understand how to behave. And I think you have some ideas on how to behave in a healthcare environment. So turning the question back to you, what is best practices for etiquette in a healthcare environment?
Well, I fully agree with what you said, but the situation is the following. I think, as you mentioned, healthcare is a very closed shop environment. People don't understand it. At the same time, it touches everybody. So everybody has been a patient at one point in their life. Everybody has touched a hospital or a doctor at one point in their life. So there is the need to get a specific approach to it and to learn best practice. I think what is key for in the entrepreneurial setup is to think transsectoral. So basically not only medicine as it is, but also talk about medtech, at the same time talk about pharma, talk about reimbursement, and then talk about technology, and now get the business angle into all of that. So you basically need to cover a whole set of people instead of just one set of wherever you say, okay, this is automotive. I need an automotive manufacturer, maybe a techie, and then I combine the two. In the healthcare system, in the ecosystem, it is very difficult. The revenue streams are difficult. To understand the system itself is difficult, and then to gain access. So talking about best practice, one should gather as many professions as possible at the table, and from there on establish solutions that are technically feasible and at the same time medically desirable. So in the end, you need to figure out who's your client, who's your customer, and who's going to pay for it in the end. So that's where I see best practice in understanding all of that. So turning the question again back to you, how should that be done? How can that be achieved?
I mean, from our point of view and from what we've learned in the past couple of years is that, I mean, what's important always to start a new business is to have a very good and well elaborated need In this case, need of a patient or the need of a clinical professional. This is the basis. If you find something that somebody is really missing or lacking, where they have a pain, then you can start something on top of. And the question then is, do I really need to involve all these parties? Because that's a highly political game, and I would highly advise not to involve all the parties right in the beginning, because then you will talk a lot and not design a lot.
So digging a little bit deeper on that question, is that really a startup business still, or what's in digital health for established companies?
I mean, if you look at the situation, the regular situation, especially in Germany now, a lot of things, especially in digital health, have been changed to the better. The Health Innovation Hub, so the innovation agency of the Ministry of Health of Germany, has created or contributed to a new law that allows every product maker, every digital product maker, after 3 months to get their health app to the market and test on real data. And I think this is a huge step forward to more agile development in healthcare. And obviously that's favoring startups, but it's also very important for established companies to think about this new opportunity, because suddenly you're not talking about 3 years to full certification of a medical product anymore, but 3 months. On the other hand, it requires you to be as agile as a startup. So it's two-faced. You need to you have a 12 months testing period then, and in this time you need to prove that your solution is both efficient and effective. And looking at that, I think there's a lot of opportunity, but you also need to have the organizational setup to do it. And what I would recommend, or what I would love to see much more, is that established product makers look at healthcare services as an additional revenue stream, because it's a very stable revenue stream. And if you don't have all the regulatory issues involved anymore, it's also a relatively accessible revenue stream. And with the current crisis, the current situation, I think you have the share of mind of everybody in the population, and also the, let's say the acceptance of digital health services in a wider population. What lacks from my point of view actually is, how do we involve the clinicians? What are doctors saying, and how can we make them promoters of all these new digital health services? Is this a threat, or is this something where you would see a lot of value in for the profession?
Well, you're basically tickling right where it hurts and right where the problem is right now, because digital health literacy is something we're lacking. So at the moment, the doctors don't know whether it's a threat or an opportunity. They don't know what's legal, what's illegal. Talking, for example, about messaging in a hospital, that's something that has never been understood and penetrated in everyday practice, is far away from legal standards. At the same time, legal standards are far away from everyday practice, and that's where you see that the problem lies. So at one point, it is a lack of understanding, and then it's a lack of communication. A usual clinical doctor does neither have the time nor the in-depth knowledge to get into these technical things. At the same time, he or she would like to use it and would like to dive deeper into all that system, and there is no possibility for education and training. So what the two of us have started with the Digital Healthcare Academy, we are sort of tackling the problem to make clinicians and doctors understand everyday digital solutions, and at least understand who to talk to. Of course, it's a brief course, but at the same time, it helps them understand where to go to and from what point of view actually to address the problems, and how to make people that are involved in the sector, help them gain the access to the right angle, and at the same time build something that is actually desirable to be used by either the patient or the doctor, or in an ideal setup both, and have both benefit from that. So that is basically one of the things that I would see in that. From your point of view and your experience, where do you see actually the largest opportunities, and where do you still see downsides, or where there's still lack? Where are the biggest gaps?
So, I mean, the biggest opportunities, as you mentioned, collaboration in healthcare. I think digital health is an enabler for new forms of organization, and we need to really rethink where and how clinical services are being provided. And I think a lot of startups show that it's possible to collaborate with hospitals. Cliniserv is one example, for example, Heartbeat Medical, to name a few of the more clinically oriented players. I mean, obviously there's chatbots and chat services that, or medical providers that directly target the patient, but looking at the way that you can work together with the established players in the system, so hospitals and practices, is something that I see interesting, because this is where there's a direct need and a direct potential for a partnership. And you can work, yes, you need to work around a lot of technology and a lot of technological and probably educational issues. But once you're in, you're in, and this is very interesting. So collaboration, any form of collaboration, digital collaboration in a clinical or practice setting, enabling collaboration between labs and clinics, and making the patient experience better, being better informed, being better in touch with your doctor, being updated. I mean, we've seen in the Corona crisis that it takes Robert Koch Institute 14 days to get the right data. It takes 14 days to get very relevant data on the nation's state of health. And on the other hand, if you want to track your parcel from Amazon, you have the information real time. And the question is, for us as a society, what can we do in the future to enable a better understanding of technology in healthcare, that we talk about the potentials of healthcare and not so much about the potentials of data and privacy.
I fully agree with that, and I think that there is that potential, but how do you see the large corporations being agilized, to put it that way? How do you see that the momentum gets into these established players and that we get that speed, and that we gain that speed of transformation that we need? Because you said, I mean, 14 days is already optimistic. I think we're still lacking a lot of data to understand what is currently happening.
This was just data efficiency. Data quality we haven't touched. Yeah? There's a whole lot of discussion on what the data actually says, but that's a different story. On the other hand, if you look at how can we make the giants move, I think the pressure is on. I mean, if you look at the forces from US or Chinese platforms and the also very positive examples that they bring, but on the other hand, the lack of positive examples in Europe, I think the pressure is on both onto politicians and also leaders of established companies to think about ways that we can keep value creation in Europe. And healthcare is one opportunity, because this is a more localized environment. Each state has their own healthcare system, and I think it's something where still the speed of development is more apt to European culture, and this could be an opportunity that I would see a lot of companies seize in the future. The question for you, and I think for the profession also, is where do we actually then see this locus of healthcare? I mean, if you look at what Google does, what Apple does, the data is already somewhere else and not in the hospitals, usable data. But how do I make sure that I get professional and secured and also, let's say, ethical health services? And I mean, what's the outlook here?
Spot on once again. Back in the old days, the phrase in the Anglo-American world would be, the doctor will see you now, and it was rephrased as a book title that is now called The Patient Will See You Now. So it's all much more focused around the patient. The patient is the customer, and through that drives both the speed of innovation as well as, of course, the adoption rate of innovation, and through that the speed. So both are interlinked. And so the locus, as you said, will change a lot, because medicine is not happening as back in the old days only when you go see a doctor. There's one touch point, and then you don't see the doctor for another 2 weeks, and then you have another touch point. But it's basically something that is constantly happening. Modern technology helps us to monitor, to understand, to adopt therapies very, very quickly, and also the mode of interaction. When I talk with my patients, a lot of conversation happens in between. The good old phone is basically the initiator of telemedicine. That's happening. Of course, I offer video hours, consulting hours, where I do a video service for my patients. At the same time, when they send me a picture through email or some other form of hopefully safe standards of communication, I'm willing to take a look at that. I'm going to respond, and the response rates have increased a lot. So it's not that I close my doctor's office at 6 o'clock and that's it, but it's a constant process, which I think is positive, but you need to be willing to deliver that service in order to be successful in the future. Because as you said earlier, if you cannot trace it real time, and if you can just respond within a couple of days or even weeks, then you're out of the game very, very quickly. So I would say that that is super important. And going back to our original topic of networking, I think to have the right network of doctors is key. I try to be connected with my patients very, very quickly and through a lot of means. So they have my phone number, they have my email address, they can interact, and they don't shy away from that. So I see that as a positive outlook, and through that I also am now connected with a lot of other doctors, and through that have established a network that helps me to very, very quickly react to new situations and offer the best service for my patients. So basically you see your doctors that you have, you see our hospital, you see slow systems and you see fast systems. You see people who are more open or less open. How do you see the future of all that digital health evolving, and especially in the context of networking, as we said before?
Mm-hmm. I mean, if you really want to talk about the future of networking in healthcare, then what I would wish for is that next to networks of doctors, we would think much more interdisciplinary. That you once you get a diagnosis, or before you get the diagnosis, that a team of specialists looks at you, and this is probably a classically trained medical doctor, but it could be a biologist, it could be a data scientist, it could also be a caretaker, and that you have a multifaceted decision. And if you look at what happens in software development every day, and how decisions are being made on the apps we use day by day, this is exactly the same way. It's a multifaceted decision between the software programmer and the person that understands the user and the person that understands the business. And having these decisions in a much more agile way together in a team could be very, very interesting. And yes, it's more expensive in the first place because you have to pay 4 people for this diagnosis probably, but in the long run you will make better decisions because you can tailor these decisions a lot better to the patient. And especially if you look at digital health, you need to understand that probably the medical issue is one issue only, and that you need to balance it with issues from other fields. And I think understanding also for both parties, for computer scientists, for product managers, for business people, to understand how to balance this is something that we need to learn, because suddenly you're not talking about, okay, is this feature in the app nicer or is it more usable? But you're talking about, do you have an effect on the life of this patient? And I think understanding how this network works is very, very interesting for the future.
Basically also very current in the situation we've seen when you only ask one profession in medicine and don't have an interaction, don't have a board, and don't have basically a sounding board as well as a committee of experts, but you have a lot of people talking about one problem with all very little clue and very little data proficiency and data quality or data depth. Then you see that we're basing our decisions maybe on the wrong parameters, and we're only listening to a select or very thin slice of expertise, whereas we could get more. So from your point of view, I mean, UnternehmerTUM stands for connecting people and basically building the bridges. How can we trigger or catalyze this process in healthcare a little bit more, so we get more connection, more interaction, and more of a network thinking and of a board thinking instead of single opinions and single expertise situations?
I think from the perspective of innovators, from the perspective of patients, there's a lot of openness to collaborate. I mean, what you see for a long time already is that there's patient communities that innovate. This has been a theme in open innovation for a very long time. But it's been neglected by clinical practice to a certain extent. Also from the side of innovation, healthcare is a very, very interesting market, and it's a very popular investment opportunity as well. If you look at digital health investments at the moment, they're skyrocketing, not already before Corona. And what I would wish for is, especially in Germany, that we can create more openness in the clinical environment, because what we're lacking, and this is something that also you brought up, is that we have the medical expertise in the product at an early stage. Because I mean, you can only create a good medical solution, a good medical outcome, if you integrate medical experts right in the beginning. But for this, you need the openness, and openness in the medical field is costly. And the hopes is that, especially with new possibilities, for example, that are provided through the payers, that we can open this clinical system up for more innovation.
I thank you. From what I've seen in you, you are the person living basically the connectivity, you are living openness, and you have this positive attitude of, we will find a solution, we don't have a problem, but we have a solution for an existing problem. Is there something you would like to give our audience as a take-home message, where you say, okay, this is how you get that positive spirit, this is how you do ideal networking, this is the way to go about it?
I mean, probably you can follow what I did, because basically, I mean, we started a lot of things hands-on, and little by little professionalized all this, and this is how you create output. And I think if you start by asking your doctor not only about how you feel and what hurts you, but what hurts him, probably you figure out the first instance to a possible good solution. And perhaps your doctor has time. And I think this is the call for you. This is what I would like to, or I'd like to give you the opportunity as last words. What would be the call from your side? What would we need to change in the attitude of doctors in the system, and also the system? So where do you see a direct leverage to change something on the other end? I'm talking from the patient side.
Well, to get a little bit more Dominik attitude, I think that would help already a lot, and I'm talking about you, Dominik, in that context. Richard Branson has once phrased it, the difference between successful and less successful people is 2 letters, it's about do. And a lot of people are hesitant and think whether they should do or whether not. When we think about when we started the Digital Health Summit, we didn't know where we were heading. Now we're going into the 3rd year, and it's a success story, and it has grown in attention. It's the same thing with a lot of these things. I've just started makehealthdigital.com, and I say this is about exchange, and maybe we didn't know the first day where we're going. It's evolving every day. And I think that's something that is very charming, and people need to dare to do that. At the same time, medicine is basic science, and you better, as a surgeon, have a very, very good idea where you want to end up in surgery, as well as any other medical doctor should know what they're doing. And now they need to sort of unlock the potential of being spontaneous and finding solutions in the digital setup where the downside is not as big as in medical therapy. So a little bit more do attitude, and then just dare, exchange, and in terms of networking, approach people, talk to people. Once you get in touch with people, you will see a more open setup. We have found so many open faces, open hearts, and open doors, which we went through, and where we've reached a lot, where we've reached a lot of people, and at the same time where we've gained a lot of experience. So I say, screw it, let's do it. That's the idea, and that's, I think, what is key about it. And I look forward to working in the future with you, and I thank you very much for the conversation that we had.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now over to Miki for some final words.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It's been a real fun and insightful and energetic talk. So big thank you to both of you, Dominik and Dominik. We will see you all hopefully again in 1 week on July 28th at 4 p.m. for our last talk before we head into a summer break. And I'm very excited that I will get the chance to talk to Ferry Heilemann, co-founder of Leaders for Climate Action. And he will be talking to me about climate change climate action, and why it's time for entrepreneurs to really take action. With that, have a very nice afternoon and see you next week.